Gemma Mitchell. Gemma Mitchell was not the kind of person anyone would suspect of what she did. Born on July 22, 1984. Australian-born, raised in the UK, she had graduated from King's College London in 2006 with first-class honors in human sciences, winning the Hamilton Prize for Anatomical Excellence. Her university training included full-body human dissection. She trained as an osteopath, but after 2015 was not registered with the General Osteopathic Council and could not legally practice, instead advertising online as a self-styled healer. She lived with her mother, Hilary Collard, and sister in a dilapidated £4 million family home in Brondesbury Park, northwest London. The house had no roof. She and her mother had lost £230,000 to a fraudulent builder, and the property was essentially uninhabitable. Mitchell was desperate for money, and she knew exactly where to find it. Her victim was Mi Kwun Chong, known as Deborah, a 67-year-old Malaysian-born widow who had lived in London for more than 30 years. Chong had paranoid schizophrenia, had been sectioned, and believed she was in a relationship with Prince Charles. The two had met at a North London church around August 2020, and Mitchell positioned herself as Chong's spiritual healer. Chong's estate exceeded £700,000. She had initially offered Mitchell £200,000 for renovations, then withdrew it. That withdrawal would cost Deborah Chong her life. On June 11, 2021, Mitchell traveled to Chong's home with an empty blue suitcase. She remained inside for over 5 hours and emerged at 13:13 with the suitcase heavily laden. The post-mortem found a comminuted skull fracture and multiple rib fractures. Chong's head, first 2 cervical vertebrae, and larynx had been surgically severed. Mitchell, with her anatomical training, knew exactly how to do it. She then forged a will leaving 95% of Chong's estate to herself. Later that day, she attended St. Thomas's Hospital with a fractured finger she falsely blamed on a car door. What does it take to walk into a hospital hours after doing something like that and calmly explain away an injury? Mitchell stored the suitcase in her garden for 2 weeks. 2 weeks with the remains of the woman she had befriended, sitting in her back garden while she went about her daily routine. Then, on June 26th, she hired a Volvo, using the identity of deceased neighbor Virgil Georgita, whose passport and reactivated phone she had stolen, and drove 200 miles south to Salcombe, Devon. She had thought of everything: the stolen identity, the hire car, the distance. But she had not planned for a flat tire. An AA repairman who attended a puncture en route reported a musty smell, and Mitchell's confused demeanor. A roadside breakdown nearly unraveled her entire plan. On June 27th, the body was found by a family on holiday at the foot of a footpath near Bennett Road, Salcombe. Scraps of paper bearing Bible quotes lay with it. A family on a seaside holiday found what Mitchell had left behind. Police arrested Mitchell on July 6, 2021, at her Kilburn home. She gave no comment to every question. Not a single word of explanation for any of it. Tried at the Old Bailey before HHJ Richard Marks, AC, Mitchell was found unanimously guilty on October 27, 2022, after 7 hours of jury deliberation. On October 28th, she received life imprisonment with a 34-year minimum term. Her sentencing was the first televised sentencing of a woman in England and Wales. Judge Marks called her extremely devious and the act done for gain. Mitchell is held at HMP Bronzefield, Surrey. Her mother publicly insists on her innocence, but no successful appeal has been recorded. Crime and investigation. UK's two-part Body in the Suitcase, The Murder of Deborah Chong, first aired in September 2023 and was rebroadcast in April 2025. Deborah Chong trusted Mitchell. She opened her home to her, offered her money, and prayed beside her at church. And Mitchell used every bit of that trust to take everything Deborah had. Gemma Mitchell used her surgical training to do something unthinkable, and a forged will to try to profit from it. But the next woman on this list kept a bedroom shrine to the people she admired most, and they were all serial killers. Shay Groves. Shay Lauren Groves, born in January 1996, was 26 at the time of the act. She lived at Botley Drive, Lee Park, Havant, Hampshire, with housemate Lauren White, a self-described goth and pagan with no job and a young daughter. Groves kept a bedroom shrine to serial killers, with framed portraits of Myra Hindley, Peter Sutcliffe, and Rose West, a Celtic dagger under her pillow, 2 Viking axes, and a BB gun. She lied to friends that she had terminal cancer. She was diagnosed at trial with emotionally unstable personality disorder. A woman who idolized killers, slept with a blade under her pillow, and surrounded herself with weapons. What could possibly go wrong? Her victim was Frankie Fitzgerald, 25, a plumber from Portsmouth and father of 2. He had been Groves' on and off boyfriend since February 2022. A working man with 2 children who walked into a relationship with a woman who kept daggers and axes in her bedroom and portraits of convicted killers on her walls. The judge accepted that Fitzgerald had a prior domestic conviction against a previous partner and had mistreated Groves on occasions. The relationship was troubled from both sides. But what happened on the night of July 17th went far beyond any claim of self-defense. Because you cannot claim you were defending yourself against a man who was asleep. At approximately 3:12 in the morning on Sunday, July 17th, 2022, after discovering messages between Fitzgerald and a girl who claimed to be 13, actually 17, and immediately blocked by Fitzgerald, Groves reached for the Celtic dagger she kept under her pillow and stabbed him once in the neck while he slept, severing his left internal jugular vein and partially severing the left carotid artery. She then inflicted 19 further wounds to his chest and heart. The first wound was fatal. He was already dying when she continued. Everything after that was not about ending a threat. It was about something else entirely, something the portraits on her walls might explain better than anything she said at trial. The judge called it a crime of passion, driven by jealousy and possessiveness. 4 hours later, Groves made a FaceTime call to friend Vicky Baytup, laughing, showing the body and saying, "I just lost it. I picked up my dagger and stabbed him in his neck." She was laughing. 4 hours after what she had done, she FaceTimed a friend and laughed about it. Baytup, horrified, dialed 999. Police arrived at 8:04 in the morning to find Groves in a pink fluffy dressing gown with a strong smell of bleach in the house. She had tried to clean up. She had changed out of her clothes. And then she stood in front of officers and told them, "I took a man's life." No hesitation, no attempt to explain it away, just a flat admission while standing in a dressing gown in a house that smelled of bleach. The 5-week trial at Winchester Crown Court before Mr. Justice Timothy Kerr saw Groves run 3 failed defenses: self-defense, loss of control, and diminished responsibility. 3 separate arguments for why what she did should not count as what it was. The jury rejected all 3. How do you claim self-defense when the victim was asleep? She was convicted on February 17, 2023. On February 22nd, she received life with a 23-year minimum. She wore a jacket with a pentagram drawn on the back to sentencing. Even on the day she was sentenced to life, she wanted everyone to know exactly who she was. No successful appeal has been identified. The case has been covered extensively in true crime podcasts, including Real True Crimes: The Case Against Shay Groves. Frankie Fitzgerald's 2 children will grow up without their father because a woman who worshipped killers decided to become one. She slept next to pictures of Myra Hindley and kept a weapon under her pillow. And when the moment came, she used it on the man lying beside her. Shay Groves idolized serial killers and kept their portraits on her wall. But the next woman on this list seemed like the opposite. A respected primary school teacher who buried a secret in her own back garden for months. Fiona Beale. Fiona Beale, born December 16, 1973, was 47 at the time of the act. She was a Year 6 primary school teacher at Eastfield Academy, Northampton, regarded by her head teacher as one of the best. She lived with her partner, Nicholas Billingham, at Moore Street, Kingsley, Northampton. Their 17-year relationship had survived his multiple affairs, including fathering a child with another woman and his severe gambling addiction, losing over £23,500 to 3 gambling sites in 14 months. On the surface, Beale was a dedicated educator. Underneath, she had created an alter ego she called Tulip 22. Her victim was Nicholas Billingham, 42, a builder and father. His gambling had devastated the household finances. His affairs had humiliated Beale repeatedly over nearly 2 decades. But none of that explains what she did next, or how calmly she did it. On November 1st, 2021, Beale invited Billingham to bathe with her with the promise of intimacy, got him to wear a sleep mask, likely restrained him, and struck him once in the right side of the neck with a forged handle utility knife she had bought days earlier. She had purchased the weapon in advance. She had lured him into a vulnerable position. This was not a moment of rage. This was planned. The wound was 6 centimeters deep and severed his right jugular vein. In a journal she later wrote, she named her homicidal alter ego Tulip 22, reckless, fearless, and efficient, ruthless. I started plotting as Tulip 22 after he'd gone to bed. She dragged his body downstairs and buried him in a concrete block structure in the side return of the garden. How does a primary school teacher go from planning lessons to planning a burial in her own garden? What followed was a performance that lasted months. Beale used COVID isolation as cover, then told everyone Nick had left her. She impersonated him on his phone for months, replying to messages from his family and friends as if he were alive. She even replied, "All good X" to his mother from his handset. Think about that. A woman typing reassuring messages to a mother from her dead son's phone, pretending to be him. On December 23rd, 2021, she hosted his mother for a Christmas drink. Feet from where he was buried, she sat with Nick's mother, making conversation, pouring drinks, while his body was decomposing in the garden just outside the wall. She went back to teaching. She marked homework. She stood in front of a classroom full of children every day, knowing what was in her garden. Her mental health collapsed in February 2022, and she fled to High Boran's Lodges near Windermere, Cumbria. After a welfare check and a crisis incident on March 15, 2022, police found her journals, one titled as a confession referencing Tulip 22. Police searched Moore Street, found a blood-stained mattress, freshly painted walls concealing evidence. And on March 19th, a cadaver dog located Billingham's partly mummified remains. A first trial at Northampton Crown Court collapsed on day 64, when a key defense witness turned out to be a custody officer. 64 days of trial thrown out because of a procedural failure. The entire process had to start again from scratch. The Old Bailey retrial began in April 2024 before HHJ Mark Lucraft, KC, the Recorder of London. Beale initially pleaded guilty to manslaughter by loss of control. But on April 26, 2024, she changed her plea to guilty of the full charge. After months of claiming she had lost control, she finally admitted what Tulip 22 had always known. On May 30th, she received life with a 20-year minimum. Earliest parole around 2041. ITV broadcast, "Killer in the House," the murder of Nicholas Billingham in January 2025. Nicholas Billingham's family waited years for justice, through a collapsed trial and a retrial, while the woman who took him and buried him in her garden played the role of grieving partner. Fiona Beale buried her partner in the garden and then hosted his mother for Christmas drinks, meters from his remains. But the next case involves a woman who convinced her new boyfriend to carry out her plan, and then flew to Jamaica for a holiday while the victim's family grieved. Rachel Fulstow. Rachel Fulstow, born January 24, 1986, was 37 at the time of the act. She lived at Andrew Drive, Huntington, York. A Leeds Metropolitan University graduate working for a property management company, she had had a single 2019 Tinder one-night stand with Liam Smith at a York hotel. That one encounter would ultimately cost Smith his life. Her boyfriend and co-defendant was Michael Hillier of Sheffield, whom she met online on Hinge in December 2020. The victim was Liam Smith, 38, a former soldier and self-employed electrician from Chorley, father of 2 sons. He was well known for fundraising for a deceased friend with motor neurone disease. A man who served his country, ran his own business, and raised money for charity. Fulstow had told Hillier that Smith had harmed her during their 2019 encounter, though in her own evidence she refused to use that word and had accepted a follow-up lunch with Smith the day after. She made an allegation she would not even repeat under oath, and on the strength of it, a man was executed on his own driveway. Liam Smith never got a chance to defend himself against the claim. He never even knew it had been made. On Thursday, November 24, 2022, at around 6:40 in the evening, on the driveway of Smith's home at Kilburn Drive, Shevington, Wigan, Hillier approached after 10 hours, waiting outside in a cloned plate Mitsubishi Shogun. 10 hours sitting in a vehicle on a residential street, watching a house, waiting for one man to step outside. He wore a high-vis jacket and head torch to look like a utility worker. Shot Smith point blank in the face with a modified shotgun, calling him a disgusting name, then doused the body in sulfuric acid and soda crystals that were still fizzing when discovered. A disguise, cloned plates, a modified weapon, acid prepared in advance. This was not a crime of impulse. This was an operation planned and coordinated, and Fulstow was the one who set it all in motion. Greater Manchester Police Operation Vestige under DC Wine. Gina Brennand initially had no witnesses, no suspects, no weapon, and no motive. It looked like a case that would go cold. But then technology filled in the gaps. A bin lorry dashcam and an Asda delivery van provided footage of the Shogun on cloned plates near the scene. Digital forensics cracked the case wide open. Fulstow's phone yielded damning premeditation searches, including, "Does acid corrode stainless steel? What is premeditated? And how long it takes to burn a car?" She searched for the definition of premeditated. She was researching whether what she was planning qualified as the very thing she was planning. 6 days after what they had done, the couple flew to Jamaica for a 2-week holiday. A man was dead on his own driveway with acid eating through his skin, and the people responsible were on a beach in the Caribbean. Hillier was arrested in January 2023. Fulstow in February. The 7-week trial at Manchester Minshull Street Crown Court before HHJ Maurice Green saw Hillier removed from court during summing up after shouting at the prosecutor. On August 23, 2023, a jury of 10 returned unanimous guilty verdicts after 6 hours and 44 minutes. Fulstow received life with a 30-year minimum for the act, plus 18 months concurrent for perverting the course of justice. Hillier received life with 33 years. On March 21, 2025, the Court of Appeal refused Fulstow leave to appeal on 4 grounds. 4 grounds, all rejected. A true crime TV series about the case is in development. Earliest parole around 2053. Liam Smith's 2 sons will be in their 40s before the woman who orchestrated their father's death is even eligible to apply for release. He was a soldier, an electrician, a fundraiser, and a father. She met him once on Tinder, told a story she would not repeat under oath, and had him executed on his own driveway 3 years later. Rachel Fulstow searched the internet for how acid corrodes steel and then went on holiday while a family buried their father. But the next case is simpler and in some ways more chilling because it happened in a kitchen during an argument, and the woman who did it called emergency services and told them exactly what she had done. Sonia Blenkiron. Sonia Blenkiron was 41 at the time of the act. She lived in a flat on Gatcombe Road, Hartcliffe, Bristol. Her defense barrister told Bristol Crown Court she had been in free fall after her daughter was removed from her care. Her life had been unraveling for some time. Neighbors described her as confrontational and provocative. Police had been called to her flat multiple times before the night in question. A court order had forbidden her partner Paul Wagland from being at the property. She admitted having previously given Wagland 2 black eyes. The warning signs were everywhere. Police knew. The courts knew. A legal order had been put in place specifically to keep these 2 people apart. So why was he there? And what happened when the night turned bad? Her victim was Paul Wagland, 52, her partner of about a year, a grandfather whose family described him as artistic, caring, funny, and ambitious. His family called him Wags. He was a man who made people laugh, who cared about his grandchildren, who had a life full of people who loved him. He was not supposed to be at her flat. There was a court order specifically designed to keep him away. Police had been called before, multiple times. Everyone who lived on that street knew the situation. The courts knew, social services knew, and yet there he was. On the night of January 30th, in the kitchen of a woman who had already given him 2 black eyes on a previous occasion. Why do people go back to the places and the people they know are dangerous? That question sat at the heart of this case from the beginning. In the early hours of Monday, January 30th, 2023, during a drunken argument in her kitchen, Blenkiron struck Wagland once in the chest with a kitchen blade while, the prosecution said, he cried and apologized to her. A neighbor heard him crying, then a thud, then silence, followed by Blenkiron telling him, to wake up. He was crying. He was saying sorry. Whatever the argument was about, he was trying to make it stop. And she reached for a blade. One wound. That was all it took. Then she changed clothes, visited a friend as though nothing had happened, came back, attempted to wash evidence from the bathroom sink, and only then dialed 999. She had time to change, time to socialize, time to clean before she thought to call for help. Or perhaps she knew there was no help left to call for. Her emergency call was chilling. No, the patient is dead. Me and my partner had a fight, a massive fight, and I stabbed him with a knife, and he's dead. She said it matter-of-factly. No panic, no remorse, no crying. Just a flat statement of what had happened, as though she were reporting a broken window. She called him the patient. Body cam footage showed her asking officers, "Please don't cuff me," while standing before decorative signs in her flat reading, "Home is where the heart is, and love with no regret." The irony of those words, hanging on the wall of a flat where a man had just lost his life, was not lost on anyone who saw the footage. DCY Mark Almond said she showed a remarkable lack of empathy. In the hours after what she had done, she visited a friend, attempted to clean up, and then reported it as though filing a complaint. Tried at Bristol Crown Court before HHJ Peter Blair KC. Blenkiron pleaded not guilty, claiming self-defense. She said Wagland had been the aggressor, but the evidence told a different story. There were no defensive injuries on her. The neighbor heard him crying, not her. The jury rejected her account unanimously on August 11th, 2023. On August 14th, she received life imprisonment with a 15-year minimum. Earliest parole around August 2038. No reported appeal. Paul Wagland was a grandfather who cried and said sorry in the last moments of his life. And the woman who took it from him called emergency services, told them he was dead, and asked not to be handcuffed. If you've made it this far and enjoy deep dives into the most shocking criminal cases, hit that subscribe button and don't forget to press the bell icon. Sonia Blenkiron ended a man's life, while he apologized to her. But the next case involves a woman who was not the one holding the weapon, but who was the reason it was lit in the first place. Mayreed Philpott. Mayreed Philpott, née Duffy, was 31 at the time of the fire. She lived at 18 Victory Road, Allenton, Derby. She had met Mick Philpott in 2000. As a 19-year-old single mother leaving a difficult relationship, moved in within days, and married him in May 2003, with his then mistress, Lisa Willis, as bridesmaid. Mick had a 1978 conviction for attempting to end the life of a 17-year-old girlfriend. She knew who he was. She knew what he had done before. And she married him anyway. Mayreed had no prior convictions, but the trial judge described her as Mick's chattel, a woman so controlled by her husband that she had lost the ability to act independently. But at what point does being controlled stop being an excuse for what you helped to do? The household was unlike anything most people could imagine. Mick, Mayreed, and his mistress, Lisa Willis, lived together with their combined children. Mick fathered children with both women. The arrangement lasted years, funded largely by benefits. Then in February 2012, Lisa Willis left him and took her 5 children, 4 of whom Mick had fathered. A custody hearing was scheduled for the morning of Friday, May 11th, 2012. Losing those children meant losing roughly £1,000 a month in benefits. Mick wanted them back, and he had a plan to get them. In the early hours of Friday, May 11th, 2012, Mick Philpott poured petrol through the letterbox of their own home and set it alight with 6 children asleep upstairs. Mairead phoned 999 while family friend Paul Mosley disposed of the petrol containers. The plan was to start the fire, have Mick stage a rescue from a back window and come out a hero, then blame Lisa Willis for the arson, win custody of her children, and restore the lost income. The rescue failed. The fire spread too fast. 6 children died of smoke inhalation. Duane, who was her son from a previous relationship, Jade, John, Jack, Jesse, and Jaden. Duane survived the fire initially, but died in hospital days later. 6 children, all of them under the same roof because their parents set the house on fire underneath them for a benefits claim. The investigation uncovered damning evidence. Forensic analysis found petrol on the clothes of all 3 defendants. Covert listening devices placed in the Philpotts' police-funded hotel room and in the prison van captured exchanges, including Mick asking, "Are we sticking to the story?" and Mairead replying, A bugged encounter in the hotel room involving Mairead, Mosley, and Mick was said by the prosecution to have been used to keep Mosley on side and cooperative. Derbyshire Assistant Chief Constable Steve Cotterill called Mick's tearful press conference a sham. The crying father begging for help finding whoever set his house on fire was the man who had lit the match himself. At Nottingham Crown Court, before Mrs. Justice Catherine Thirlwall, after an 8-week trial, all 3 were convicted of 6 counts of manslaughter on April 2, 2013. Mairead by majority verdict. On April 4th, Mick received life with a 15-year minimum. Mairead and Mosley each received 17 years. Thirlwall called Mick a disturbingly dangerous man and told Mairead, "These were your children. Your first responsibility surely was to them. Instead, you joined in with his plan." Her November 2013 appeal was dismissed by the Lord Chief Justice. Mairead was released on license on Friday, November 27, 2020, from HMP Send after serving 8.5 years, the automatic halfway point of her determinate sentence. She is reported to have been given a new identity at public expense. She is the only person on this list who is currently free. She served 8.5 years for the deaths of 6 children, walked out, and was given a new name. Mick remains in HMP Wakefield, parole eligible in 2028. Paul Mosley died of a heart attack, aged 58, on October 6, 2025. The house at 18 Victory Road was demolished in September 2013. The street where 6 children died was torn down. But the families who lost them still carry the weight of that night. Mairead Philpott helped set fire to her own home with her children, sleeping upstairs for a benefit scheme. But the next case involves a woman whose weapon of choice was far more personal, and whose husband's injuries were so severe that the pathologist had never seen anything like them. Hannah-Gret Donnelly. Hannah-Gret Donnelly was a German-born 55-year-old former NHS midwife living on the Berryfields estate, Aylesbury, Buckinghamshire. She had given up her career to raise and homeschool the couple's 4 children, who were between 13 and 21 at the time of what she did. The family were described as exceptionally close, overtly religious, and isolated. No mobile phones, no landline, and minimal contact with extended family after around 2014. A household cut off from the outside world, with a woman at its center who controlled every aspect of daily life. She had no prior convictions. The press called her the rolling pin killer. Her victim was Christopher Donnelly, her 55-year-old husband of 23 years. A biochemistry graduate and talented musician trained at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. He had given up teaching in 2015, and by January 2018, was so physically broken he could barely walk. A neighbor described him as resembling a man in his 80s. He was 55. How does a man in the prime of his life deteriorate to the point where neighbors think he is 80? The answer was inside the family home. Over a prolonged period at the family home, Hannegret inflicted a sustained campaign of harm on her husband, culminating in his death overnight on March 30th, 2018. The post-mortem recorded 78 external injuries, fractures of the neck, thoracic and lumbar spine, and both shoulder blades. There were 2 larynx injuries indicative of neck compression, cauliflower ears, and chronic bone remodeling of the entire skull. The pathologist said he had never seen a case with so many injuries over such a long period. 78 injuries. Bones that had fractured and healed and fractured again. A skull that had been reshaped by repeated blows. She used a wooden rolling pin and likely other household items. The cause of death was recorded as bronchopneumonia following repeated trauma. His body had simply given up. On the morning of March 31st, 2018, Hannegret called an ambulance. Paramedics found Christopher on the bathroom floor, clearly dead, with head wounds in various stages of healing. Some fresh, some weeks old, some that had healed and been reopened. She immediately admitted hitting him with a rolling pin, but she described the beatings as jokes or playful chases round the kitchen table. Playful. That was the word she used to describe what produced 78 injuries and a skull that had been permanently reshaped by repeated blows over months and possibly years. Blood spatter was discovered throughout the house, in rooms the children would have walked through every day. Evidence showed she had no injuries herself, despite claiming illness affected them both. This was not mutual. This was one-sided, sustained, and hidden behind the walls of a home with no phone line and no contact with the outside world. Senior Investigating Officer D.C. Felicity Parker of Thames Valley Police noted the case as a stark reminder that men can be victims of domestic harm. Christopher Donnelly had been suffering in silence, in a home with no way to call for help, for longer than anyone outside knew. The charge was upgraded from wounding with intent to the full charge on the first day of trial at Kingston upon Thames Crown Court in March 2019. The prosecution argued this was not a single event, but a prolonged pattern of conduct that ended a life. Before Mrs. Justice Yip, with prosecution by Eloise Marshall QC and defense by Tim Maloney QC, Hannegret was convicted unanimously. On March 22, 2019, she received life with a 16-year minimum, no reported appeal. Earliest parole board review around 2034. The case has featured on Peacock's Meet, Marry, Murder and Sky Mixes Made for Murder, broadcast in February 2025. Christopher Donnelly was a musician, a father of 4, and a man who was beaten so severely inside his own home that his bones tell the story his voice never could. The family had no phone. The children were homeschooled. There was no one to call and nowhere to turn. Hannegret Donnelly beat her husband for years with household objects until his body gave out. But the next case involves something that happened in a single night, in a caravan, fueled by substances. And the victim was not an adult. Cyan Hedges. Cyan Hedges, born September 2, 1996, was 24 at the time of the act. A former barmaid and holiday camp worker from Chartham, Kent, she had suffered depression, panic attacks, and PTSD, and was diagnosed at trial with borderline personality disorder traits. She was co-defendant with her boyfriend of 10 weeks, Jack Benham, born July 22, 1988, a former British soldier living in a caravan in his parents' back garden at High Street Road, Hernhill, near Faversham, Kent. 10 weeks. She had known this man for 10 weeks and brought her son into his caravan. The victim was her own son, Alfie Phillips, who was 18 months old, previously healthy, monitored by an NHS specialist as thriving. A child who had been doing well under medical supervision until his mother moved him into a caravan with a man she barely knew. On the night of November 27th to 28th, 2020, in Benham's caravan, the pair consumed most of a liter of whiskey plus rum. Hedges snorted half a gram of one substance while Benham smoked a gram of another. The post-mortem recorded approximately 70 visible external injuries, around 50 of which were inflicted on that single night. Complete fractures of both arms just above both wrists. A fractured leg. Multiple fractures to the feet and toes. Multiple rib fractures. A fractured sternum. Evidence of smothering. Evidence of neck compression. 2 probable and 1 possible bite marks. 1 consistent with Hedges' own dental profile. Substances were found in the child's system. The judge stated that substances had become the main focus of their lives. Cause of death was recorded as unascertained because multiple mechanisms could each have been fatal on their own. There were so many injuries, so many fractures, so many signs of different kinds of harm, that doctors could not determine which one actually ended his life. 50 injuries in a single night to a child who weighed less than most people's shopping bags. Benham carried Alfie to his parents' house at around 11:30 the next morning. Paramedics found rigor mortis already present. Alfie was pronounced dead at QEQM Hospital, Margate, at 12:35 in the afternoon. Both were arrested on hospital grounds that evening. Text messages retrieved from their phones told a story of escalation that had been building for weeks. In October 2020, when Alfie had bitten Hedges' arm, Benham sent her advice. "Bite him back, babes, just not as hard." That text was sent weeks before the night in question. It was not a one-off comment. It was a window into how they treated this child as a matter of routine. The cruelty was already casual enough to discuss over text message. By the time November arrived, the escalation had nowhere left to go except where it went. The 9-week trial at Maidstone Crown Court before Mr. Justice Kavanaugh saw the pair blame each other. Each pointed at the other. Neither accepted responsibility. The jury did not believe either of them. On November 30th, 2023, after approximately 10 hours of deliberation, both were unanimously convicted. On January 12th, 2024, in the first sentencing ever filmed in a Kent court, Hedges received life with a 19-year minimum. Benham received life with a 23-year minimum, the judge finding Benham was the prime mover, but making clear that Hedges bore full responsibility as a mother who failed to protect her child. Kavanaugh called it a frenzied attack and said substances had become the main focus of your lives. On August 1st, 2025, the Court of Appeal refused Hedges' leave to appeal, rejecting her challenge to the bite mark evidence and calling this otherwise a very strong case. Alfie Phillips was 18 months old. He was thriving under NHS monitoring. Then his mother moved him into a caravan, with a man she had known for 10 weeks, and 70 injuries later, he was gone. Cian Hedges and her boyfriend inflicted 70 injuries on a child in a single night. But the next case involved a prolonged campaign against a young girl. And when it was over, the people responsible fled the country and left a handwritten note on the body. Bayinash Batul. Bayinash Batul, born July 14, 1994, was 29 at the time of death. She was stepmother to Sarah Sharif, wife of Irfan Sharif, and mother of 5 of her own children. The family lived at Hammond Road, Woking, Surrey. Batul herself had been a victim of honor-based mistreatment as a teenager, held captive by relatives and disowned by her father. She had 1 prior conviction for theft and fraud. Her co-defendants were her husband Irfan Sharif and his brother Faisal Malik. Sarah Sharif was placed with her father by the family courts in 2019 after concerns about her mother. A teaching assistant described Sarah as bubbly, confident, chatty, engaging, a little feisty. She was placed into the care of the people who would end her life. Sarah died on August 8, 2023 at home in Woking after a prolonged campaign of cruelty. The sentencing remarks of Mr. Justice Kavanaugh describe instruments used against Sarah, including a cricket bat, a metal pole from a high chair, a mobile phone, a domestic iron that left sole plate-shaped marks on her body, boiling water poured over her taped ankles, masking tape used as restraints, a homemade hood, and 6 bite marks. Forensic odontology excluded Sharif, Malik, and Sarah's brother from the bite marks. Batul refused dental impressions. The judge held that the only possible inference is that it was you. The post-mortem by Dr. Nathaniel Carey found 71 fresh external injuries with older healing injuries, 25 fractures, including 11 spinal fractures, a fractured hyoid bone indicating manual strangulation, and serious older brain injury. Within an hour of Sarah's death, Batul called a travel agency. Within an hour. Not a doctor, not the police, a travel agent. The following day, the family flew one way to Pakistan, booked on Malik's credit card. They packed their bags, gathered 5 other children, and boarded a flight out of the country while Sarah's body lay in the house they had just left. Sharif left a handwritten note on Sarah's body. "Whoever sees this note, it's me, Irfan Sharif, who killed my daughter by beating. I beat her up too much." On August 10th at 2:47 in the morning, Sharif phoned Surrey police from Pakistan saying, "I've killed my daughter. I legally punished her, and she died." He used the word legally. He believed what he had done was within his rights. Sarah's body was discovered that day. 3 days before Sarah died, Surrey Council welfare officers had visited the wrong address, a fact revealed by the November 2025 safeguarding review. The wrong address. 3 days before a child died. The people whose job it was to check on her went to the wrong house. The review found multiple missed opportunities across education, health, policing, and children's services. All 3 returned voluntarily to Gatwick on September 13th, 2023, and were arrested on the plane. They came back on their own. 5 weeks after fleeing the country, they walked back through the airport and into handcuffs. At the Old Bailey before Mr. Justice Kavanaugh, the 10-week trial ended on December 11th, 2024, with unanimous convictions for Sharif and Batul. Malik was acquitted of the primary charge, but convicted of causing or allowing a child's death. The judge said, "The degree of cruelty involved is almost inconceivable. and called the treatment torture. On December 17, 2024, Sharif received life with a 40-year minimum. Batul received life with a 33-year minimum. Malik received 16 years. On March 13, 2025, the Court of Appeal refused all three leave to appeal and dismissed the Solicitor General's request to increase Sharif's sentence to a whole life order. In January 2025, the family court judges who placed Sarah with Sharif were publicly named: Judge Allison Rayside, Judge Peter Nathan, and Judge Sally Williams. The judges who decided Sarah should live with the man who ended her life now have their names in the public record. Whether that accountability means anything remains to be seen. Sarah Sharif was described by her teacher as bubbly, confident, and feisty. She was placed into the care of the people who took all of that away from her. Bayinash Batul refused to give dental impressions because the bite marks on Sarah's body would have matched. But the final case on this list involves a mother who deliberately isolated her child from every agency that might have saved him. Christina Robinson. Christina Robinson was 29 at the time of the act. She lived at Bracken Court, Ushaw Moor, near Durham, County Durham. She had grown up in Tamworth, Staffordshire, and Bulgaria, moving to the Northeast in 2020. Married to Gabriel Adu Apau, a trained pharmacist who had joined the ERAF in August 2022. Her husband was away on training throughout the period in question. She was simultaneously conducting an online affair with Chisholm Innocent Onoja from Middlesbrough and was pregnant via a sperm donor she had kept secret from her husband. She was a follower of the Black Hebrew Israelites, watching the group's YouTube sermons and citing the Bible's use of the rod as justification for disciplining her children. No previous convictions. Her victim was her own son, Dwelaniah Robinson, who was 3 years old and weighed just 14 kilograms at post-mortem. He had a younger brother. What happened to Dwelaniah was not a single incident. It was a 17-day campaign culminating on November 5th, 2022. On October 19th, 2022, Robinson plunged Dwelaniah naked into scalding bathwater and held him down long enough to cause full-thickness burns to 20% of his body. A textbook forced immersion pattern. She then treated the burns at home with aloe vera gel and bandages rather than seek medical help, because medical help would have meant questions, and questions would have meant intervention. She repeatedly struck him with a bamboo garden cane, inflicting 19 tramline bruises with a Z shape visible in 2 places, for what she called trivial offenses. On November 5th, at around 4 in the afternoon, she shook him forcefully, causing a fresh subdural hematoma and retinal damage. The prosecution said the injured child had become an inconvenience. Robinson waited at least 19 minutes before dialing 999, during which she phoned her husband, searched online for how to resuscitate a child, and sent a WhatsApp message. 19 minutes. In an emergency involving a child, 19 minutes is a lifetime. And she spent that time not performing first aid, but searching Google for instructions. She told the call handler Dwelaniah had choked on food. No obstruction was found in his airway. The story did not hold up from the first moment paramedics arrived. He was pronounced dead at University Hospital of North Durham just over an hour after the call. The post-mortem by Dr. Nigel Cooper recorded cause of death as head injury and infected burns, with evidence of an earlier brain injury sustained roughly 2 days before. The bamboo cane held his blood. Neighbor Alan Hurst described hearing a whimpering sound through the walls for weeks. Weeks of a child whimpering through the walls of a terraced house and no one intervened. No one called. No one knocked on the door. Durham's Operation Arowana was led by DCY Simon Turner. Tried at Newcastle Crown Court before Mr. Justice Garnham, Robinson sacked her legal team on day 13 after giving evidence and represented herself for the final 2 days. On March 21st, 2024, the jury unanimously convicted her of the primary charge and 4 counts of cruelty. On May 24th, 2024, in a televised sentencing, Garnham sentenced her to life with a 25-year minimum. He rejected the prosecution's request to classify the cruelty as sadism, but called it a gross abuse of a position of trust. Text messages to Onoja showed Robinson's attitude toward her son. He'll get what he deserves, no more, no less. She wrote that about her own child, to a man she was having an affair with, while her husband was away serving in the RAF. At sentencing, Robinson maintained her innocence. "I did not kill my child. I pray for a day when justice will be served." She stood in front of a judge with the evidence of burns, fractures, and bruises laid out before the court, and said she did not do it. No reported appeal. Her mid-trial decision to dismiss counsel severely limits the grounds available to her. No major public safeguarding review has been published, consistent with Robinson having deliberately avoided healthcare and agency contact to evade scrutiny. She kept Dwellinaya away from doctors, away from nurseries, away from health visitors, away from anyone who might have seen the burns and the bruises. By the time anyone heard his whimpering through the walls, it was already too late. This was all from our side today. Thanks for watching. Click here to check out another video.